Oh, for the camera?
For the projector.
Oh, sorry.
That's it? Okay. And with that, I'd like to call the Budget and Public Employees Committee hearing to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd. Alderman Holmberg.
Present.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Present. Alderwoman Sonier.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. Chair Spencer.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. We have 4 present, we have 4.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Budget and Public Employees Committee hearing, where we will be hearing Board Bill Number 1, our city's budget. We're really grateful to our Board of Aldermen staff and STL TV for accommodating an off-site meeting, and we thank you all for spending part of your afternoon with us to share your thoughts on the city's budget. As you know, a city how we spend our money, these are all taxpayer dollars. They're all your money. It's public money, and having public input on how we do that is incredibly important to the success, the trust, and the function of our community. So thank you all for being a part of that. I want to give a special thanks to the Alderwoman from the 7th, Alderwoman Sonier, for hosting us here in the 7th Ward and arranging this venue here, and the folks at 2720 Golden Record for hosting us. With that, what I'd like to do before we get into the public comment section, we've invited our city's budget director, Paul Payne, to present an overview of the city's budget to kind of go through that. He's not going to give the full presentation, so please be mindful of that, but we wanted to make sure we provided some context for the public comment portion before that. Okay? If you haven't already signed up and you'd like to speak or make a comment, we do have sign-up sheets in the back. Please we won't be able to take folks who haven't signed up. If you haven't yet grabbed some of the materials that were provided, which is an overview of the city's budget, they're also in the back at the table with our clerk. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our budget chair, Mr. Paul Payne, to present a small summary of our city's budget. And
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm going to careful. Very good. Yeah, thank you. As the chair mentioned, the good news is I'm not doing the whole presentation. It's just going to be a short summary, hopefully hit some highlights the chair asked me to, and then I'll move on my way, and I'll have your comments on it.
Paul, do you mind sharing with folks how long you've been the budget director for the city?
Yes, I've actually been with the budget division for 35 years, but I have been director for 16. So this is
And Paul, you serve the board of E&A, correct?
yeah. The budget division reports to the board of E&A, which is the mayor, the comptroller, and the president of the board of aldermen. So basically, I've got 3 bosses, all elected officials. So it's a matter of trying to ensure that whatever proposals we have meet the priorities of those elected officials. And this portion of the process right now is before the board of aldermen, and they review that recommendation, and that's the stage we're at now. And under the charter, we are required to have a balanced budget by July 1st. So what we are doing right now is the Board of Aldermen as their budget, in the purview of the Budget Committee is reviewing the budget, and they are going to be making recommendations. Now they can reduce the budget, but they cannot increase it without the approval of the Board of E&A. So typically what happens is there's a little bit of horse trading in the month of June where there might be some reductions and then requested increases, and then the Board of E&A will reconvene at its regular meeting in June to review some of those so that they can get back with their recommendations to this committee, and they can report it out to the full board so that they can vote out a final budget by July 1, which is the charter requirement. All right, with that, let me just go through some of the highlights of the budget. Total budget's $1.3 billion, and as illustrated on the slide above. I do want to point out that those last two categories, and you see the general fund, which is the biggest share, it's over 50% or 43% of the budget. The enterprise funds down below, that's our airport and water division, our function as businesses, so they're not really tax dollars, but they are separate entities. And the internal service funds are funds that departments charge themselves. They're also more like the gas internal fund and health benefits. But all those categories above it, the special revenue, which are dedicated funds, grant funds, debt service funds, capital improvement funds, are all mostly tax dollars. And I should point out that's about what we call governmental funds. That's about $900 million, which is quite a bit, but I'll tell you that in the city of St. Louis, that is not all the tax dollars in the city of St. Louis. And because there are other entities within the city, particularly like the school board, which gets about 60% of the property tax. You also have the library, zoo museum district. You've got the Children's Services Fund, the Mental Health Board, Senior Services Fund. There are other tax sources that do not come through the city of St. Louis government per se. But what this is addressing is the budget of the city. Revenues year to date actually have been doing pretty well, although we have been seeing a slowdown in the third quarter. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about that. We do anticipate some economic slowdown. I don't know if you follow the economy a bit, while the feds have been jacking up interest rates to get control of inflation, we do anticipate an economic slowdown, and you'll see in the revenues that I'm not expecting much growth next year. And you can see the sales tax and local use tax receipts have been up, although recently they've been showing some signs of cooling off. Restaurant and hotel taxes have recovered from the pandemic. They were the hardest hit. But again, in the more recent months, they've also been slowly tapering off. If you look at the revenue, again, this year we are exceeding budget estimates. If you look at the FY23 over and under, and again, all those special funds, which are primarily sales taxes. But for FY24, you're going to see that there's very little, if any, growth in our assumed estimates for next year. And again, that anticipates an economic slowdown in the latter part of this calendar year. General fund budget of $566.9 million. Just a couple of the big highlights. 70% of our budget is personnel, or personnel costs, salaries, benefits, and pensions and such. So anything that involves pay and salary or benefits consumes an awful lot of our increase or our available revenues. And in this year's, and I'm sure you've heard a bit about this, there is a significant pay increase for police and firefighters of 8 to 13% in their pay matrix. And so that's a large increase in the budget. And then other non-uniform employees, 3% across the board, plus they get a 1.5% matrix. And scattered also, or related to those increases, are pension increases, which continue to rise. They have been rising in the last few years. As the markets see some upheaval, you're going to see increases in pension costs. So that's the biggest item you're going to be seeing in terms of increases in this budget. Below that, you just see some various increases scattered across departments. For instance, the comptroller's office, we've had increases in our insurance costs for insuring buildings. We had some one-time costs and pay adjustments in our what we call non-departmental accounts. That's sort of a catch-all department. It's not specific to any one department, but it's items which are budgeted citywide. And some of the bigger increases you're going to see, for instance, in the street department, and you may have also heard something about that, refuse. The cost of refuse is rising significantly, particularly with recycling. So that is something, and you've heard about having to examine how we go about picking up our trash and disposing of our trash. Well, it used to be where recycling would be, we'd get revenue from it. And then it became where it was, you have to pay for disposal, but it was still cheaper than normal trash. Well, this year that whole dynamic flipped, where it's costing us more to dispose of the recycled waste than it is regular waste. And next year, anticipating that to go even wider. So that's something that is an issue that's going to have to be resolved going forward. And so that's why you hear a lot of talk about it. In public safety, this will be the first year of the Office of Violence Prevention under all in one roof. In previous years, it was scattered across departments. And so the Office of Violence Prevention has a number of initiatives there. And so that's why you see an increase in that department. But you can see that's just a mechanism for showing how the general fund is balanced at $66.8 million. On revenues, again, as I mentioned, while we are capturing the growth in the current fiscal year, so the general fund budget is up 5%, we're not anticipating growth next fiscal year. And you can see some of our major earnings, our tax sources, earnings tax, payroll tax, I've got it seeing declines next year, simply because we're anticipating that slowdown. The sales tax, which typically is not a strong grower, has been growing mostly due to inflation, we expect. The underlying, you still always have that underlying growth rate, but it's been juiced a little bit by inflation. Well, as inflation comes back and the economy slows, we're not anticipating that same rate. So I do have it up by 1% next year, but that is slower than what we're seeing this fiscal year. And some other categories, restaurant and hotel taxes, given that they were higher this year than estimated, that's in the other category. That's why there's an increase there. I won't rehash the increases of the various departments. Some of the bigger ones, finance, the insurance costs, public safety had because of the pay increases, streets because of refuse costs and such. But you can see the general fund is up by 5% overall. In addition to the general fund, if you remember that chart, that pie chart in the beginning, we have a number of special funds, and this is a highlight of some of those special funds. The local use tax, which has been growing in most recent years, particularly as third-party online sales have continued to increase. Those have continued to grow, although I'm expecting, with some weakness in the last quarter or so, no growth next year. In terms of allocations, there is a formula for those first three categories: affordable housing, healthcare trusts, and building demolition. And for those interested, affordable housing is allocated at $6.5 million in new use tax dollars. Plus, they had some repayments of some older debt to give a total budget of $7.2 million in the coming fiscal year. Economic development sales tax is another one of those funds which, by ordinance, there's a scale of appropriations that gives a certain percentage for a particular purpose, and you can see those there. I won't run all through those. The largest of which is 60% for increasing our transit opportunities, and that money has been sitting in that account and accumulating over the last number of years. We expect at the end of this current fiscal year to be about almost $68 million, and with another 14, it should be close to, 82 or something like that by the end of next fiscal year. Public safety sales tax, known as Prop P, originally the half-cent sales tax piece, and then they're dedicated at that time to police department and fire department increases, and then 6% goes to the circuit attorney's office. But accompanying that increase in the half-cent sales tax was also a like increase in the use tax. And the ordinance which authorized that also had a formula for allocating those various purposes. I won't walk you through all those, but you can see that by formula, that's where they are allocated. Capital improvements budget primarily funded through half-cent sales tax, as well as some other sales taxes for parks and such. In the last couple of years, if you're aware that the state increased the state gasoline tax, we've allocated any of those increased funds to capital as well for streets purposes. So we're beginning to see an increase there. We did take a hit this year on the way the gas tax is allocated. It's based on census, and they recalculate that after every census, and this year was the first year they calculated from the 2020, so we did take a hit there. But otherwise, we do anticipate the gas tax to be increases over the next several years, which is good because that'll provide us more funds for road and bridge improvements. And the total capital fund is $42 million this coming year. Just some personnel changes by departments and funds. Not much of a change. It's pretty much holding steady, just a net position 2. Increase in 2 positions, 28 of those in the general fund, and the rest are seeing decreases. Historically, we're down still 72, although that's been slightly up in the last couple of years from where it was previously in the pre-pandemic. City pension costs. This is one that I always, as budget director, would advise elected officials where this is one of those things where 70% of our budget's salary and benefits. And there's always concerns about making sure that our rates of pay for city employees are competitive. But there's also the need to keep in mind there are other items related to that pay that go up and may not go up until several years down the road. And pensions is one of those things. And if you look at the chart there, you can see that it's been creeping over the last few years, mostly due to some of the market performance recently. But also, as we increase pay, you're going to see increased pension costs. And so when we talk about how do we make salary and benefits competitive, it's not just salary. So sometimes when you see just salary comparisons, I always say, well, just you keep in mind that there are other benefits, particularly pensions, that we have to keep an eye on in order to maintain a balanced budget going forward. Sure. Oh, how you want to do it? You want to do it at the end?
Yeah, we're going to conduct this like a normal hearing, if you don't mind, and we'll let the budget director kind of go through.
Okay,
Please.
sure. And this is another funding overview. We have 4 pension systems. It tells you what the funded status is of each of the systems. The big takeaway from this, I tell folks, is that there's an actuarial basis, which is a smooth basis, and then there's a market basis. And if you look at that graphic, you'll see that the market basis is actually lower than the actuarial basis. And what that tells you is there are still some losses that have not yet been recognized. So failing a surge in market returns and such like that, we're likely to see increases over the next several years in our pension costs. One area of good news we've had recently in the last several years is we've actually gotten to a point where we're restoring our fund balance. And one of our knocks from the rating agencies has been that our reserves are incredibly insufficient for what a normal city our size would have. But so some folks, when we have a reserve or we have a surplus at the end of any at the end of any fiscal year, we have an ordinance in place which allocates 1/2 of that surplus to the capital fund, which is good policy because it's a one-time surplus. You have a one-time expense on capital. But the other half stays in the surplus as a fund balance. And through those type of mechanisms, and we also, when we were lower, we also forced just budgeting for a contribution to the balance. GFOA, which is a recognized organization, Government Finance Officers Association, recommends having 2 months of general fund expenditures as part of your reserves. We actually met that and just barely exceeded that in this past fiscal year, and we intend to continue being higher than that in FY24. So that's actually an area of positive. And actually, we just recently received a credit upgrade from Fitch a couple weeks ago, and they did cite our improved fund balances as one of the pluses in the plus column. All right, quick recap, $1.32 billion budget. This is a 7.3% increase prior fiscal year. Some of those highlights, you got about $25.4 million. That's all funds for pay increases. You've got aside from that, you got another $8 million in pension cost increases. I didn't cover the fact that we are allocating $3.9 million to SEMA to replace the siren system, which is needed to be replaced for a number of years. We do have a $3.6 million increase to cover the costs of refuse for our costs of waste disposal. And we've got the Office of Violence Prevention, its full year budget of $2.6 million, an increase there, and then a $2.3 million increase in the comptroller's budget for insurance premiums, and on down the line, some other increases for facilities management, fleet service repair, and such. Capital budget's $42.2 million. The budget's balanced, although we do anticipate some economic uncertainty ahead. So we haven't budgeted all our revenues. We do not use ARPA. We have not used ARPA for balancing the budget. And so we do have other sources available should the economy turn south in a hurry. And so we always have to be prepared for that. And so that's about what I have, just as a quick summary of the budget.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. If you don't mind, would you mind taking a couple questions from the from the general public?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
If you don't, what we'll do, since we don't have, we're going to ask people to come up and give testimony there. But for the folks at home and for transparency, if you could speak loudly, and then I'll repeat your question for the folks watching on YouTube.
Wonderful, yeah. So the 70%, does that include pensions? So 70% of our budget goes towards...
So the question was, does this, yeah, or you could, yeah.
Yes.
The 70% of our total budget does include pension cost?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering what the police department improvements refers to, if you know, in this
On the capital budget?
Okay, so the question was about police department improvements and what that is in the capital investments.
Yeah, the capital fund consists of a number of sales tax allocations, the biggest being the half-cent capital. And in the ordinance which authorized a half-cent capital, 10% of the half-cent sales tax was allocated to the police department for capital improvements, most of which is allocated towards offsetting some debt service payments in the police department, and there's a residual piece that's allocated towards things like fleet replacement. But that's by ordinance.
Did you have a question?
I've got a question. My name sounds uneducated, but there's been a number of large-scale development projects in St. Louis, some of which even contribute to things like opening a medicinal and recreational cannabis industry. I don't understand why we don't expect any increase in revenue for growth.
Okay,
Oh, sure.
so the question is, we have a lot of development in the city of St. Louis, why there's no projected growth in the revenue for the city of St. Louis. And just for clarity, so if we were to go back to slide 6, the revised estimate, while the revenue for fiscal year 2024 is greater than the estimate for 2023, as of right now, the revised estimate is for 2023 is roughly equal to the projection for 2024, as you pointed out. So,
You're saying the growth that I would be thinking about has happened in the 2023 fiscal year, so there's not going to reflect much growth.
no, typically, so I mean, I think we had a better than anticipated year in 2023, so the projected revenue for 2023 is a little bit less than what we actually saw, but there's almost no projected growth for 2024, and I'll let the budget director speak to that, the reason why on that front.
Yeah, that's actually a good question, because there is really no magic ball that says, hey, this is what's going to happen in the current fiscal year. So as the chair had mentioned, this current fiscal year, we are exceeding budget estimates, so, which is always a good thing to have and going in. But when you look ahead, and when we're trying to devise what the budget is for the next, again, you're looking forward 12, 15 months in advance, what are most people saying about the economic outlook and the economy and what revenues are going to do? Well, when you look at it, and it's been somewhat consistent for the last few months, is that everyone's anticipating the economy because of the Fed's actions and control inflation, you're going to start seeing a slowdown in the economy. We haven't seen it yet. So you always hope maybe it doesn't happen, but most projections are showing that somewhere probably around the fourth quarter of this current calendar year, you're going to have an economic slowdown, if not an actual recession. And once you get into a recession, you never really know. So most people are thinking, hey, maybe this will be a mild, and then you pop back up. Great. But you don't know that for sure. And so when preparing the budget, you try to be reasonable and somewhat maybe conservative. You don't know if it's conservative or not. I can tell you other years where the recession in 08 and 09, disastrous. I mean, and you knew right coming out the bat, there's no way we're making that revenue estimate. So hopefully you plan in advance, you sort of take what the best information is you have at the time, make an estimate, and then you monitor once a fiscal year begins to see how you're doing.
I'll add a little bit to that as well. While there are a lot of really exciting projects, and new growth in marijuana and other things, we have a dispensary just around the corner if you didn't notice. We are also experiencing a lot of population loss. In the last 2 years, there's been 5% population loss, and this budget doesn't account for those growth factors nor the potential for continued population loss, which is a big, big driver, obviously, of our revenue. So you can't account for everything in the budget, and hopefully we exceed it this year like we did last year. But of course, with the market uncertainty in general sense, we're just planning the best we can. Is there any other questions for the budget director before we take actual public comment on the budget itself and specifics?
I have a very general question, and it's directed to the committee too. For the public, when you're developing the budget, how much control or say-so does the committee have over what's allocated to different divisions of the city and what they do with that money, or is it left up to the commissioner of each department to take that money and work it out?
Okay. Well, what you're seeing now is that process. So the Board of ENA, with whom I work for, makes a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen for the appropriation. So you can't spend money without an appropriation. So the Board of Aldermen takes up that bill, and they have this committee to review things. So from that standpoint, if there is something which is, they say, hey, this is not right, and we'd like to see something either increased or decreased, they have various mechanisms to do that and go back to ENA and say, hey, we disagree with this, or we'd like to see more of this, and sort of that, negotiate that through this budget process. Now, throughout the year, now obviously most departments report to the mayor's office in terms of direction and operations, but the alder people begin to express their opinions about where things might not be to their liking, and then that's communicated in that way. But right now in this process, which is the appropriation process, this is sort of a key function of how they have their wishes known. And so we go from there.
I'll add a little bit more just for, in plain English, the Board of ENA, the City of St. Louis has a Board of Estimate and Apportionment, which is the mayor, the comptroller, and the president of the Board of Aldermen. And they put together these giant budget books with the help of the budget director, and they really set the budget, and that budget is presented to the Board of Aldermen, and this committee within the Board of Aldermen then considers in more detail all of the specifics. And as the budget director pointed out earlier, we have the authority to make cuts in the budget. We do not have authority to make additions, although there is, as the budget director pointed out, some horse jockeying, or there can be some discussion about how we could possibly make recommendations to make additions to the budget. But we don't have the capacity within the Board of Aldermen to really set a full budget. The directors of each department do present a requested budget to the Board of ENA and the budget director, and actually those are outlined in here. So you can see the requested, the proposals, and then what's presented to the Board of Aldermen, and we make those we make recommendations back to the Board of ENA if necessary. It's kind of a complicated process, and it's also extremely very educational and extremely laborious. How many hours do you think we've spent so far? Lots. I don't know.
I mean, probably at least 30 a week.
Yeah.
At least 30 a week.
Okay,
in
so-
addition to the other duties.
Yeah, that's true. So we'll take any other additional broad questions for the budget director before we get into public comment about specifics related to the budget. Yes.
I'm just curious where the budget is LRA.
Okay, LRA is the Land Reutilization Authority, which is the city's land bank. So anytime a piece of land goes on tax, is behind on tax sale or is donated to the city of St. Louis, it goes into our land bank. Our land bank, LRA, is actually not under the city. Believe it or not, it's under SLDC, which is the St. Louis Development Corporation, which is a separate quasi-governmental entity that is a separate nonprofit. The city funds them to some limited capacity, but all of that is under LRA. We did hear the budget for SLDC earlier today, and the director of SLDC did provide the documents for that budget hearing to members of the public who requested. So if you'd like to see those items, we can provide it. I can actually share with you mine while we're sitting here, if you don't mind giving it back to me while I have a digital copy. Okay? Okay. With that, what I'd like to do before turning it over to the general public is turn it over to committee members who may want to make a comment or two or add any flavor to any of the questions that were already answered before going into the general public. I'm going to go in order of seniority and start with Alderman Oldenburg. Did you want to make any statements?
No.
Alderman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Saunier.
I just want to thank you all for coming out today and engaging. I feel like this is like a good start to a turnout, and just to see, you know, citizens and residents thinking about this. At the end of the day, this money comes from everyone who lives here paying taxes. And I think too often the jargon is at like 400. So many things aren't understandable. So I'm glad that Chairwoman is, you know, putting in the effort. And as a committee, we're putting in the effort to meet people where they are and to make this more of an accessible understandable process. If you feel like, someone asks, is this an educated question? As a new board of alderman member, trust me, there's no, I ask a million questions. Sometimes I'm not asking them on the screen, but there's no dumb questions. Please get everything that you can possibly get from this space. I have probably asked a question that you might have assumed I knew. That's okay. We're here to learn. So I just want to thank you all for coming. And obviously, we're in the 7th ward, which is the ward that I represent. So I'm always happy to bring folks to our stomping grounds.
Alderman Aldrich?
I'm like all the way over here on the other side of the table. And I just want to echo, and me and Alderwoman, Sonia do this all the time, echoing each other, but echo what she said. I just want to thank everybody for coming out today. You could have been doing anything else at 4:30 on a warm Wednesday, but you decided to participate in your city government. And like she said, no question is a dumb question. And thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here because this is really important, so thank you.
Okay. All right, with that, what we'll do is go through the members of the public who've signed up. For anybody who came in late and wants to speak on the budget, make sure to sign up in the back if you haven't already done so, and we'll go ahead and start in order of those who signed up. I'm going to ask you all to identify yourself. I'm going to swear you in as a matter of city ordinance requirement. And if you don't mind, give us a general sense of maybe where you reside in the city, either your block or your neighborhood or just some kind of landmark to give us a sense of kind of where you're coming from, geographically speaking. Okay, and you'll have to forgive me if I mispronounce your name. I'm sure I will. Mr. Charles Bryson, to start us off. Oh, yeah. Oh. Okay. All right, we'll get everybody who has signed up to speak. Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Okay, everybody who has signed up to speak, Charles Bryson, Glenn Burley, Nate King, Amanda Gardner. If you don't mind, everybody just put up your right hand. And this is our suggested oath. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do too. Awesome. Okay, but we'll still have you introduce yourself and give us some sense of where you're coming from and who you might represent.
My name is Charles Bryson. I live downtown. I work downtown for TrailNet, which is a regional body for Safe Streets for All.
Okay, and Charles, thank you so much. What I'm going to do here, I do believe we've generally speaking given people 3 minutes to speak. So if you don't mind, I'll do that and I'll give you a 30-second, I'll try my best to give you a 30-second warning, okay?
Got it.
Go ahead.
Ready? All right. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Spencer and members of the Budget and Public Employees Committee. My name is Charles Bryson, Policy Catalyst for TrailNet, the regional nonprofit advocacy organization devoted to Safe Streets for All. TrailNet has long been an advocate of safer streets. Throughout the formation of our crash report, we have had or tried to have an impact on what is going on with our streets in our city. What we have discovered is the need for a comprehensive citywide street mobility and transportation study, which Mayor Jones brought into being as of last year. But without a clear vision and proper funding, that will come to naught. To begin this, we must have a Vision Zero, no fatality approach, and someone dedicated to do that job. Without that sort of grounding, this will be a useless exercise in terms of the Community Mobility Committee, Community Mobility and Transportation funding. The next two things are important to us and are things we've talked about previously with many of you. Number one, get rid of ward capital. Number two, get rid of the 50-50 sidewalk program. Ward capital has been a failure and does not make logical sense. Equally funding each ward without paying attention to the stark disinvestment in other neighborhoods throughout our city, including those that have lower income, those that depended on public transportation, is a failure. And it has led to a divided city between the haves and the have-nots. It needs to end. That $11 million that is projected in the budget, if I saw that correctly, should go directly to the streets department. Whether it's a fund set up within the streets department to handle some of the issues in some of the areas that are in most need, that should be done. There are other ways to look at addressing the funding that is necessary for some of those areas. One would be how much use public transportation, how much are you have seniors, how many people there are affected because they have a disability. All of those things can come into play either through the census or the American Rescue Plan. I'm sorry, the American Service Committee that does the annual look at the demographics of the city and the state. Am I at time?
Yep, I could try to give you that 30-second warning, but
Okay.
yeah. You were
Finally, 50/50 sidewalk program needs to end. It is atrocious that you are having people who are renters not being able to fix up the sidewalk and homeowners who are able to do that. So you have a lot of disinvestment in neighborhoods where you have a lot of renters.
Sure. Thank you, Charles. We really do appreciate it. Just for clarity, we do have, over $1 million of that 11 ward capital is going to dumpster replacement. There's other things other than streets that we're expected to pay for out of that. It is a system that is definitely far, far, far from perfect. But just for the general public's knowledge, we actually rely on it for park improvements and the 50/50 sidewalk program, so many other things that come out of that meet, like what is just $11 million. It's literally all we have to improve our neighborhoods at this point, which is really unfortunate. I'll let any other members of the committee weigh in. Okay.
Mayor,
Yep.
Mayor, respond. And that is understandable. The baseline for me is get rid of it. If there must be, and I remember last year, the previous board went through this exercise of looking at metrics and determining how much funding should go to various areas based on metrics. I think even when we go back to that, you'll see an improvement over, or you'll see an allowance for greater areas of greatest need.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Yeah, certainly hear your perspective, especially as it relates to Vision Zero and the need to address pedestrian fatalities. Our next speaker, Glenn Burley. Glenn, if you don't mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about where you're from.
Yeah, hi, my name is Glenn Burley. I live in the Marine Villa neighborhood. So again, thanks for having me here today. Again, my name is Glenn Burley. I also am the Community Engagement Specialist for the Metropolitan St. Louis Equal Housing and Opportunity Council, or EHOC. We are the St. Louis Region's Fair Housing Initiative Program Partner, which means that we provide contracted fair housing counseling, investigation, and enforcement services to HUD. These services are provided throughout the entire St. Louis metropolitan area and even throughout the entire state of Missouri. I'm here to talk about the budget, the current rental affordability crisis facing St. Louis, and how we need to significantly add more affordable housing spending to meet these associated needs. As the COVID public health emergency has come to an end, so have federal and other programs that have helped tenants stay housed. In the months since these monies have run out, we have seen significant increases in the amount of evictions filed in St. Louis City. To help keep people housed and stop families from being disrupted and displaced, we must invest in a number of programs. First, EHOC stands with other agencies that are strongly suggesting a significant investment into a right to counsel program that will allow tenants facing evictions to access free legal assistance. This idea has been discussed before the Board of Aldermen, though it did not pass last session. We are joining other advocates in asking that at least $600,000 be allocated to start this program to help tenants facing evictions. Furthermore, we ask the Board of Aldermen to plan for significant and sustained spending on this program. It is important that St. Louis take steps to level the playing field between landlords and tenants. For too long, most tenants have faced an uneven playing field engaging with landlords in court. This program is an important first step in making sure that that changes. It's important just making sure that we get past talking about the program and that we fund it, and that we fund it long term. So we're also joining other nonprofits in asking $250,000 which matches the amount that CDA was unable to utilize for the intended purpose of rental assistance, be allocated to additional rental assistance. Furthermore, EHOC has significant concerns about displacement of low-income renters who are disproportionately members of the Fair Housing Act's protected classes. This trend directly relates to the city's obligation to affirmatively further fair housing under the Fair Housing Act. Much of the city's low-income housing tax credit finance housing stock is reaching the age where it's coming to the end of rent stabilization. This means that that affordable units in desirable neighborhoods in the center of the city and near Southside are now converting over to market rate units, and those original tenants are being displaced in real time. This is largely due to the age of the low-income housing tax credit program and the fact that we're just at the period of time where this was inevitable.
30 seconds.
Unfortunately, successive administrations have ignored this issue, leading to there being no program or solution being placed into action. It's important to note that there is no realistic way that we can replace these units, especially in quote-unquote neighborhoods of opportunity. Since the times these units were built or construction costs and requirements have increased significantly, meaning that as these units are lost, we are not able to replace them one for one. This means our total number of low-income rent-stabilized units for the city is on a steady path of decline. We're asking the city to take steps to dedicate funding to a plan that would entice landlords and developers to keep income-restricted, rent-stabilized units in their buildings.
Thank you, Glenn.
I'm going to finish it up real quick here. And this is important because the city does have the affirmatively furthering fair housing obligation as a recipient of HUD funding. The city is required under federal law to make proactive plans to ensure that we have diverse neighborhoods. And as low-income units are leaving the central corridor, we're losing diversity in these neighborhoods. We have no plan to undo this. We're just hoping the market takes care of things. And there's no reason to believe that would happen, right? And again, the city has an obligation to make a plan to deal with this. I would also note that unlike many things in local government, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars are strong. As Paul Payne said, the
Glenn, I
use
want
tax
to be
money
fair to everybody. I did give you a 30-second warning. I'm so sorry. But if you have additional things you want to share, you can certainly send them via email. Next up, we have, did anybody want to respond on the committee to that?
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah. Your work in affordable housing is not lost on us. We've spoken a lot about it here within the committee. Nate King is up next. Nate, if you don't mind introducing yourself and telling us.
Yeah.
Who you
So
with.
I'm Dr. Nathaniel King. I moved to St. Louis to do my PhD at WashU in biomedical engineering. I'm a data scientist with Edward Jones. This is all important because I want to ask you to stop funding ShotSpotter. ShotSpotter uses machine learning algorithms to try to identify where shots are occurring. And looking at longitudinal studies, what we see is that it just doesn't work. I'm referring to two studies that were peer-reviewed, one based in Chicago, over a decade of data, and the other one here in St. Louis, 1 decade of data. Looking at over 90,000 shots in these two studies combined, what we see is that there's a 10% accuracy. That means that 10% of the time, when police are sent to someone's front door and told there was a shot here, 10% of the time that's correct. The other 90% of the time, that's just not what happened. So the way that people in our community see machine learning is that it is AI, it is God, right? When you hear about ChatGPT, it can answer all your questions. Well, this is bad machine learning. This is bad data science. And perhaps ShotSpotter is telling you that actually it's good data science, and they'll bring out interesting studies that they have that demonstrate that their product works. What I want you to think about, though, is look for those peer-reviewed studies. Who is actually writing this? Is it ShotSpotter company itself, or is it a third party not involved with this? Looking at peer-reviewed studies who are not funded by ShotSpotter, we see very low efficacy. I would never pay for a machine learning algorithm that was a 10% accurate algorithm. Like, this is just garbage. So in addition, it's an image processing algorithm, or what they purchased was an image processing algorithm. They're trying to apply it to an audio system, right? Gunshots are audio, images are visual. These are not compatible, and it's bad data science. So I am here today, and I really want to say thank you. I'm from the 6th Ward. I'm on the 3900 block of Russell Boulevard, and I want to make St. Louis a better place. And I appreciate you all being here today so I can speak up. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Do we have any comments from the committee?
Are you able to send those studies to us?
I will. What email address can I send that to?
You can send it to any of us. You can Google, yeah, and we'll distribute it to the committee. Mhm. Okay, next up, we have Amanda Gardner. And then Amanda, if you don't mind, stating who you are and a little where you're from.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Ray Gardner. I'm actually a resident of the 8th Ward. I'm also an organizer with both the We the Tenants campaign and the Defund, Re-envision, Transform campaign. We speak in campaign spaces about budgets being moral documents, so I'm going to paint you a picture of what the morality of St. Louis City looks like. This committee heard from every department justifying their budgets for the next year. Your constituents watched on YouTube as the Department of Human Services begged for stopgap funding for programs for the unhoused that they developed out of COVID, as the Streets Department stated that they can't fill potholes. But then you asked St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department what else they didn't get when budget cuts were made, and they said, well, we've got astronomical raises. We got the take-home cars that we asked for from ARPA once-in-a-lifetime funding, but yeah, I guess we could go for more cars because everything else they had asked for had already been met, right? In the Civilian Oversight Board's presentation to this committee, it was stated that there is approximately 100 complaints against the police department right now. So for approximately 1 in every 10 officers has either brutalized or murdered or otherwise harassed our neighbors, but we're still set to give them $189 million. SLMPD solved just 56% of murders between 2013 and 2021, but we chose instead to scrutinize the route completion rate of our overworked and underfunded refuse department. So my question is, what would this city look like if we took that $189 million for other purposes? Picture it, summer 2024. Our Parks Department has so much money, there's simply too many summer camps for parents to choose from. Bored teenagers no longer need to hang out downtown and serve as a crime fear-mongering talking point because we funded youth jobs and activities. It rains, and no one braces themselves wondering whether the trash in our sewers and our antiquated infrastructure will yet again cause catastrophic floods and displacement. I'll close this testimony with some tangible dollars because I know you all got our budget toolkit a couple weeks ago, but I understand that some folks on this committee can't look at our demands with open eyes and understand what the investment in the police department is doing to this city. If we took that money from the police department, if we defunded ShotSpotter, SWAT, and SLMPD overtime, we could fund a match for the CDA HUD funds that were supposed to be used for rental assistance. We could fund Right to Counsel before it even gets to the Board of Aldermen for a vote, so that that program, as soon as it is voted into session, can actually be funded next year without requiring ARPA allocation. And finally, why don't we give more money to our unhoused brethren? They are residents in this city too, and we don't treat them as if they are poor people in need of our support. We instead take the streets department and use their funding to use their equipment to bulldoze people's homes. So, in conclusion, we should not be funding anything for SLMPD, but we should at least be taking away money from ShotSpotter, SWAT, and overtime.
Thank you, Amanda. Did anybody from the committee have any response?
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, I'm having a hard time reading, Chiquita Hill. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, you all. My name is Chiquita Hill. I wanted to thank you all, sirs and madams of the Alderman Board, for allowing us to be here tonight. I'm with the group Action St. Louis, and I also volunteer with the Defund program. I'm here, and I want to just share a little bit of my personal experience until why we need the right to counsel. COVID hit about almost 5 years ago, and around that same time, me and my children were displaced from our apartment where we lived in a very nice neighborhood. But St. Louis has changed tremendously in the last 4 years due to COVID. I've seen so much of fear in everyone to where I almost became homeless after I had surgery, so now I'm receiving disability. I can't work too much, but the prices of everything has skyrocketed, including the amounts of rent. I speak to people, I go out and canvass, even though I don't feel like it. I feel like I'm helping people to speak and be their voices because I don't see us winning when we're so far apart. Like, our city is so polarized. it's like just catching on. This thing that we're going through is affecting the teenagers. Like, we got kids that lost their parents due to COVID. Okay, they're out here, they have nowhere to turn, some of them. You don't know a person's story when you're just being judged, you know. You can't read a book without turning a few pages, you know. So I would like some of the money that you all are putting into all these protective services towards these businesses and stuff like that that aren't really preventing anything, but still causing more further damage. Like he said earlier, we have the have and the have-nots. Those that people don't value, yeah, you know, we really not gonna hurt them. People are gonna look over them. And we have so many unhoused here that are facing eviction right now. All this is stemming from probably before COVID, but it has gotten out of hand. I see people are literally in my backyard. I can't be mad at them because of the condition they're in, because I don't know what brought them to that condition. You can't look at me and say, oh, she has a disability, you know? So I just want us to come together, and I see us winning by coming together to help the city thrive with bringing everyone and supporting everyone with the budget that, you know, we're speaking on, because it's not just their money, it's everyone's money, and the unhoused are a part of our community. So we need to treat them like they are and not just walk over them like they're animals. Humanity, I do not see that much here, and I grew up here, formerly from the north side. And it's different. I don't like it here now, especially for my kids. We need more resources for them also. And affordable housing is something that we all need for our mental and for the future. The eviction progress, we do need more money put into that right to counsel. That will help us all. It would protect us on both ends. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiquita. Do we have any comments from you?
Just thank you, and especially for sharing your story with us. I appreciate that, and you're doing it publicly also, so just thank you for that.
Our next speaker is Tess Sanders.
Hello, good afternoon. Yeah, my name's Tess Sanders. I'm a resident of the 14th Ward, and yeah, I'm excited that, yeah, you got it. And thank you for everyone for sharing, and Ms. Hill for talking about the young people. I work at a high school with high school age students, and eventually by the end of my 3 minutes, I want to really just underscore everything really that Defund, Re-envision, and Transform people have been saying about moving funds from the $129 million proposed for police, so especially SWAT and overtime, to move towards public safety youth programs, for which there is $600,000 proposed for the 24 budget. And I've been working with Violence Prevention Commission a little bit and their youth safety initiative and the Stop, Lock, and Drop It campaign. And what I really want to relay is that when I talk to students about how they, you know, what makes you feel safe, I often hear them say, you know, when I know the person with the gun, but you can't know everybody with the gun, right? And talking to the students about police has been really eye-opening to me. Especially, I work with a lot of Black students, and some of them talk, and they're all male. They talk about their home, like one of them said, like, if you follow your home training, then there's no problem, like regarding the police. And I was like, shit, like, do you think that I had home training? Like, it's not a thing that exists, right? It didn't exist for me as a white upper middle class teenager, at least. And in St. Louis, like, there's a lack of imagination, it seems, and I'm here to really suggest sometimes that if you fund things that didn't exist before, it will help these young people to imagine them, right? Because they'll be like, this exists, like this block party, this was a good thing, I enjoyed it, I came, I felt safe. And for people to practice feeling safe without seeing armed, like tax-funded people who can kill you with impunity, right? What would it be like to feel safe without that? As we get increasingly used to seeing like surveillance states across the United States and in St. Louis, where I live downtown, the sheriffs are parked. And it's that acclimation, like, we don't necessarily have to inhabit that in the future, right? And so for
30
the young
seconds.
people, yeah, just to give them something else to look for. So increasing the proposed money being spent towards that public safety for youth programs. Yeah, youth programs, really. Hooray. Thank you all. And thanks, Golden Record.
Thanks, Tess. Any comments? Okay. Our next speaker is Paula Gartner.
Thank you very much for invitations to speak to the committee. I came to talk about sustainability and equity of our budget this evening, and particularly on what some other people have talked about with the youth, but just hearing the difficulties of possibly losing money with recycling, I would urge the money in the recycling project to be looked at and look at other studies of what cities have done, because we put more dumpsters out there and people don't know or don't understand how to even recycle, and it creates more work. The inequity of picking things up in our city is gross, to say the least. I am, as I said, my name is Paula Gertner, and I live and I work in the 3rd Ward. I live on Belle Reve Boulevard, and I am the director of Thomas Dunn Learning Center in Marquette Park in the 3rd Ward. We have the same refuge trucks that pick up at my house as in the Dutchtown area around Marquette Park. I have never once saw my dumpsters even 3/4 of the way full, ever. They're usually empty when I take my trash and my recycling out. And that's because we're homeowners on my street. And I go to work and I see them pouring out of the dumpsters. Something's not right there. I don't mind putting more money in it, but I want my tax dollars to be equitable across the city. That's not why I'm here, though. I'm here to talk about other thought processes and where the money goes. I appreciate money going into public safety and the Office of Violence Prevention, because Thomas Dunn Learning Center receives Prop S money for our youth, and appreciate it. We run The Place, a teen drop-in center in the upstairs of Marquette Park. But what we're not looking at is we're pouring money into reactive programs and not proactive programs. When our programs at The Place and other rec centers have to turn out the children at 6 p.m. in the summertime, when there's still many hours of daylight left, these kids are now on the streets. All studies will show that most of the crime happens between 4 and 8 p.m., and we can't stay open at least until dusk. I'm not asking for the pools to stay open.
30 seconds.
Folks in the rec centers don't seem to understand, and what I'm asking this committee to do is to look at not just the money that goes into the rec centers, but also the training that the staff receive, making sure that they understand best practices, making sure that they understand what they're there for at the rec centers, to take care of our kids, to make sure that the kids have a place to go after dark, that if they're running back and forth from basketball to drop-in to arts, that's okay. That's what I want my tax dollars to go to, is letting them do those things. It's a rec center, not be reprimanded and kicked out because they've went from one program to the next. Also, okay, I'm
wanna
done.
be fair, Paula.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
Thank you. If you haven't been to Marquette Pool yet this year, it just opened. It's the only free public pool on the south side, right down the street. It does. You're right. Yes. We do. Our next speaker is Jerry Connolly.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's good to see you in person for the first time in 3 years, and then for some of you, welcome as the newly elected. I believe that government accountability and public participation requires transparency. And while there have been many improvements in this body and aspects of city government, there's still a long way to go. I exchanged emails with Alderwoman Spencer this morning and was happy to receive very promptly from Neil Richardson, the CEO at SLDC, their draft budget for next year. So I asked Alderwoman Spencer and the clerk if they could post this on the website, on the Budget Division's website, SLDC's. Every department that came before this committee should have their presentations available online. And the police department came in with a massive spreadsheet that was passed around in print. But the public, we're sitting there watching the video and we've got no idea what data is being referred to. So I would encourage you to follow through and post that information online. A couple of aspects that came up in the SLDC presentation that I think are worth focusing on are the fact that the agency does use resources that flow through the City of St. Louis budget. The Port Authority budget, while relatively small, 1.3 million or so, that is part of the city's main budget. SLDC staff the Port Authority, and the Port Authority also has very broad powers. They have the power of blighting, eminent domain. They have the power to grant tax abatement, which does not necessarily need the Board of Aldermen's approval to sign off on. The board did sign off on it for incentive package up on the North Riverfront, the Lighthouse Marina project back in the fall. And that one project had 3 pieces of legislation that went before 3 different committees in the space of 2 days. And it's, for someone who follows this stuff closely, that was next to impossible to follow. It's unfair on elected officials because someone serving on Committee A didn't know what was going on Committee C. And during that process, there was kind of a revelation to me was that SLDC no longer has a role in the creation of taxing districts, some of which are created specifically to facilitate funding for development projects. 3.5 years ago, Nicole Galloway's office, the state auditor, made recommendations in an audit to the city. And to my knowledge, very few of those have been implemented. And the deputy mayor at the time, under Mayor Prusin, Linda Martinez, wrote a response in which she described SLDC's role in analyzing projects when these taxing districts were created. So I'd like some clarification. Has SLDC officially stopped doing that? And when are we going to get around to the city, as a city, to implementing the recommendations from that audit?
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate you recognizing the promptness earlier today and getting those materials. I know at least one member of the public asked for them. If you wanted, please, I'd be happy to share them. Any comments from the committee? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Our next speaker is Kat Logan-Smith. Also want to recognize we have other folks in the room. Alderwoman Shameen Clark-Hubbard is in the back joining us and listening as a matter of good, hearing from the public, even though she's not on the committee. That's we're really grateful for your presence here. And the mayor's office is also here. Director of Operations and Nancy Cross and Kevin Daly on the board. Hearing from the public is important to all of us, so thank you all for being here. Okay, Kat, go ahead.
That's a great segue, because my first point is, where was the public notice for this meeting? I don't know where y'all found out about it, but when I went to the city website to confirm all the details, I couldn't find it, so that's a thing. Should probably be looked into. Anyway, beyond that, I don't have a lot to say because I haven't had a chance to study this yet, but I have a few questions, and that is, kudos to our friends who have testified already. Glenn, thank you. TrailNet. Hold on, Charles, thank you. Thank you. Amanda, thank you, because those comments are all spot on. The question I've always had for this project, the budget project in general, is how does this budget serve children? How does this budget serve elders? How does this budget serve grandchildren. And when you look at issues like housing, recreational programs, air quality, and you follow up with how this is serving children, we have to ask questions about where our priorities are. And what got me to come today, besides this one email, was looking at the news and them talking about how much money we were going to dump into police. And I cannot answer that police serve children. I know people who are at CVPA. Okay? They're not feeling safe at CVPA right now, okay? They're high schoolers who are still having nightmares. More police aren't going to solve that. More community is going to solve that. We have to focus on big picture stuff and stop looking at the police as like the solution to everything, because what that gives you is not cleaner air, it's not healthier, happier children, it's not more well-adjusted adults, it's not more healthy taxpayers, it's not more an environment people want to come to and be in. Nobody's like, hey, I want to go to that city because they are all about their cops. Like, who does that? Nobody. So we need to be really more balanced and nuanced in how we support law enforcement, but where is the citizen side of it? This public counsel for renters is super critical. Have you ever tried to get an apartment as a single parent? If you haven't tried to do that, then you don't know what the issues are. But if you have, you are educated on how hard that is and how much discrimination happens just because you have a kid. So we have work to do in the city, and it isn't about supporting the police more. It's not about giving them everything they want and then some and sprinkles on top. It is about taking care of children, elders, and the environment so that we can live in a healthy, prosperous, thriving city. And that's what I hope we get to, and I don't think we're there yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Any comments? Thank you. And next up, we have David Gates. Is David still with us? Madam Clerk, do we have anybody else that signed up? I have these 3 sheets. Nobody else? Okay. Are you David Gates? No. Is there anybody in the back who signed? I think I've gone through. Oh. Okay. So sorry, Xavier.
You guys are great.
You could try
I
to
can
move it up,
adjust
but I
it,
think
and
there might, there might
like
be.
this? Okay.
Go ahead.
Now, I'm a little blind, so if you can give me a knuckle when I have 30 seconds or something.
like that.
Oh, well, that's even better. I can see, but that's fine. Okay. My name is Xavier Phillips. A while ago, I used to work in politics. I used to help people get elected. I used to help write board policy for all types of stuff. I'm one of those people who, they used to hate to see me at board meetings like this because I had the wrong perspective on what a board really is, you know? So you guys are fantastic and you've listened to everybody, but there's not going to be anything that you can do right here, right now. That's not what this meeting is for at all. That's not what hearing the public is for at all. So what you should do is foster community. So like I said, you guys said this. Like I said, I used to work in politics. I worked at a congressional level, then I worked at a state representative and a state senatorial level, then I worked at a local level, and finally I got pissed off and I just left altogether. Because I didn't see a point in it. So now, you told me to tell the truth, I'm telling the truth. So now I work with artists. I work with artists and poets and painters and writers and studios and engineers and all the type of people that would be in this place and make it have a great time, those people. That's who I work with, and they get along with me, even though I'm a little dry for their taste. But they like me. I'm saying that because everyone else in this room, on this side of the table, we should talk. That's what we should do. You want to know why we don't know about the meeting? It's because no one's watching the news and it's not on the news. No one's watching the website and it's not on the website. We'll put it on Instagram. That's what Amanda did. We can get 3 times as many people here. There's going to be no resolution until you force people to pay attention. That's all it is. A budget is a budget. I mean, the budget was always going to be like this. They were always going to give more money to the police. That was always going to happen. We need police. That's an unfortunate reality. We need police. You want to know why? Because we will never be able to all agree that we don't need police. So we need some form of protection for everybody. But what we do need is someone to force, and it's not really you guys. I mean, you know, I understand. I really do. They don't have as much power as you think they do. They really don't. But what we can do is, if you lean on all your elected officials in a coordinated fashion, then you'll have some good success getting some changes. I've seen it happen many times. Many times. But appealing to this board in this fashion, while they're already elected, I mean, do any of you know when they're up for election? That's the question. That's what moves boards. I hate to be real. But I actually like you guys. I know who you are. You guys are actually good. You guys are good people, and I'm glad you're here. And I hope you continue to be part of the conversation as it evolves, you know? Thank you.
I think that does it for our public testimony today. I do want to acknowledge the public notice. Kat, I think it's I don't have Alexander, Xavier. Was it Alexander or Xavier? So sorry. It was posted on the city's website. I know that's not the most dynamic thing that everyone's checking on a daily basis. Many of us posted it on social media last week, at the end of last week when we got the location solidified. Certainly there's room for improvement there, and that is a point well taken, and we will try to do better moving forward. But I want to just reiterate sincere gratitude for everybody who came out and spent some of this gorgeous day with us. For what it is worth, we are hearing you. It is important to all of us. I know that your words are important to each member of the committee, and we will do our best to try to incorporate what is important to the general public and the city's budget, and moving forward, more importantly, not just with the budget, but with our policies and what we're trying to do and advocate for in the city. I'd like to turn it over if any members of the committee want to add anything before we adjourn. Alderman Oldenburg?
Thank everybody. Really good.
Alderwoman Schweitzer? Alderwoman Saunier?
I would just say, you know, I hope that as we move forward, I think, and I know from my experience on the committee, we are trying not to just be responsive because it's campaign season or because we just got voted in. I think that's the problem with politics, and I hope that that evolution means that as we grow as a city, that we will get political leaders who genuinely care about your voice and what you think and want to incorporate your thoughts, not just when we're on the ballot, but when we're actually doing what we ask you to do, to let us do on the ballot, but to actually represent you. So that's really the only thing that I want to say.
Alderman Aldrich?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. Again, first I want to thank each and every one of you guys for coming out today. I do want to acknowledge also the committee woman from the 20th Ward that just walked in, Christy Petty, which is like kind of right where there's new districts. We're not going to work.
She is now a part of the 7th Ward.
Well, they haven't changed on the Central Committee yet, but
She's on the 7th Ward, and she's president of Gravelly Park.
I'm reclaiming my time, Alderwoman. So. But and this, we do this all the time, but wanted to acknowledge the committee woman who's here, and again, thank you for everybody come out. I think one common theme that we heard today is reimagining, and that we say no a lot, and I think it's time for the city to say yes, yes, how we can do things differently. I know being a member of this committee, I know the chairwoman has been very intentional of making sure that we dive into these budgets and not just allow folks to come in front of us and just present their budget. She has been very helpful with really making sure if we have questions to let us dive in deep. And just hearing from everybody in this forum, public setting, I think is going to be helpful for us as we move forward to hopefully see how we can make improvements to the budget in ways that we can reimagine what our city can be. So thank everybody for coming out. And this Saturday at 10 a.m., we will have another public hearing. So please spread the word. It will be at Herbert Hoover Boys and Girls Club. The address is, what's it, 2901 North Grand. So please spread the word to let everybody know that there will be another public meeting this Saturday at Herbert Hoover Boys and Girls Club at 10 a.m. Thank you all for coming.
And just before we disband, we had one more member of the general public. We did post this from 4 to 6, so recognizing that we did close out public testimony, if we have just a few more minutes, we can give one more member of the public an opportunity to speak. Okay. Is that okay? Sure. Okay, Kirsten Petty. Just to give you a little background, we did kind of go through the budget already. We're giving everybody 3 minutes. I will set the timer and give you a 30-second warning. If you don't mind introducing yourself to the public.
Hello.
Say that again. Oh, yes, we have to swear you in. Thank you so much, Charles. I really appreciate that. By city ordinance, we do require that everybody testifying gets sworn in. So, Ms. Petty, do you swear to affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I swear.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you. My name is Kirsten Petty. I'm, currently I am your 24 committee woman, not that it matters anymore. But I am also a resident of Gravois Park. My husband is the president of the Neighborhood Association. Thank you. I was asked to come today, and I excuse my tardiness. I had another meeting that I had already scheduled before I knew about this meeting. To come to talk about things about ways to help Gravois Park to get some much needed funding that we have not received in the past for various reasons. But my main, my main want, ask, need is our park itself, Gravois Park. It's at 32 Potomac Street. It is what our neighborhood is named after. We currently need a new roof for our pavilion. We need steps. We need it repainted. We need the whole thing rehauled and done. We did apply for the neighborhood transformation grant. Obviously, we don't know the answer if we've received it, what part of it. It's not an all or nothing grant if you're not familiar with it. So we may just get bits and pieces what we asked for. We may not get the whole thing that we asked for. So going forward, if we do not receive this grant, get nothing at all, what is the city planning to do to get us the money that we need to improve our park? Much needed updates. We don't even have an ADA bathroom, which, I mean, it's 2023, not 1960. We need these things to, be updated and modernized and be a park that's something that we can use. Currently, a family wanted to have their child's birthday party in the park. And then when I went to the Parks Department, they said they're not even giving permits anymore for family birthday parties. They're only going to give a permit for large events. So, I mean, that's very, unaccessible to the everyday citizen who our parks are for. And then really, really quickly, the 3100 Potomac block is a mess. It is like this. And if you can't want a visual of what I'm doing or explanation, it is different levels of the ground. Spire dug it up a couple years ago. They poorly patchworked it, and now bits and pieces are coming off. 3100 Potomac Street. So that's the one thing I can think of off the top of my head. But the main thing is, if we don't get to rehaul the whole park the way we want it through the grant, we would like the city to pay for it. Our everyday citizens, like myself and other people in Gravois Park Neighborhood Association, use their own personal funds to pay for it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any further comments? Okay. Again, thank you all for being here. If you have any additional thoughts you want to share with the committee or the Board of Aldermen as a whole, you can certainly share them with us directly. I have my business card. I can share with the entire committee or the Board of Aldermen any additional questions or thoughts that you want to share with us. Thanks again. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn the Budget and Public Employees Committee hearing.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Hearing no objections, we are adjourned. I do encourage you all to have a cocktail or a beverage or a snack on Cherokee Street and spend some money in the beautiful 7th Ward if you haven't already today. Woo-hoo. Thank you again to the St. Louis St. Louis Board of Aldermen staff and STL TV and our budget director, Paul Payne, for taking a field trip with us today.
Keep pushing that up.
What? Get it in there. What?
Leave it in.
That's right.
Good job, Madam Chair. You did a wonderful job.